Welcome to 39-minute conversations. Please wait for your host to begin this meeting. Your meeting is now being recorded.
Okay, can you see me? Can you hear me okay?
I gotta get in there. There we go. Okay,
There we go. Hey, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I'm still in the midst of moving, so I've got a little bit left to do tonight. Then I go to Sacramento for 4 days, and I come back, and then it's just clean.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do this today within the
Of
middle
course.
of all that.
Dude, thank you for reminding me. I was like, oh, I absolutely swung a miss on this one. Usually everything goes right in the calendar immediately.
Oh,
so,
when I asked you, I was like, oh, I got days before I have to like even put it in my calendar and worry about it. And then I went to send a reminder. I was like, oh, that's in 2 days. It was.
Yeah.
I think we were both a little unorganized getting this one together.
Yeah, and I also didn't do my normal thing. Is like when anyone reaches out to me or for something like this, or even just like standing on the street, I'm like, send me an email. If it's not an email, it doesn't go in my calendar. If it's not my calendar, it does not exist. I will not remember this.
Well, I'm glad we worked it out. I'm excited to talk to you about a lot
Yeah.
of stuff, but the first
Yes,
thing I do have
please.
to do is I have to get through a quick ad read that I'm going to make you sit through. I apologize.
No, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It's not real. This week's episode of 39-Minute Conversations is not technically presented by American Auto. A lot of sitcoms these days, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of many of them. They lean toward dramedy, character study, shows dealing with trauma, loss, finding some humor in those things. And I love that shit. I really do. But sometimes all you want to do is watch a show that's built to make you laugh, and there hasn't been a lot of good, pure comedy on TV the last few years. There's been a little bit of a resurgence here recently, Abbott Elementary, Grand Crew, but there's one show flying under the radar that you should definitely check out, American Auto, which is about floundering executives at an American car company trying to deal with a rapidly changing industry. Starring Anna Gasteyer, Harriet Dyer, John Barinholtz, Ty White, Michael Benjamin Washington, ex-Mayo, created by Justin Spitzer. American Auto is, in my opinion, the heir apparent to shows like 30 Rock, Arrested Development, Better Off Ted. The jokes are rapid fire, very funny, the kind of show we don't get enough of these days. If we don't support it, shows like it, we might not get much more. So check out American Auto on NBC and Peacock. And hello, I'm Brian T. Arnold, and this is 39-Minute Conversations, a podcast about reconnecting with old friends and making new ones, but I've only got 39 minutes to do it because I will not be paying for Zoom Pro. My guest today is a writer, director, actor, comedian, and improviser. He directed the horror comedy Bloodsucking Bastards, which he also co-wrote with his comedy group Dr. God. He also teaches and performs improv comedy at the PAC, a comedy theater here in Los Angeles. Please welcome Brian James O'Connell.
All right, it feels like you covered everything. Nice to see you again.
Well, see you, man. I think we did it.
All right.
We met a few years back. I was on a sketch comedy team at IO. You were obviously, you performed and taught there for a long time, and it always felt like you were a big deal there. You kind of felt like you ran the place. But you're always very friendly and welcoming, and I always appreciated that. And I'm excited to actually finally really sit down with you and get to know you better.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it is. As you get older, you're just like, yeah, I was a big deal at this improv comedy theater. It's like that's. I mean, I don't know. The slowest guy at the Olympics still made the Olympics. I'll take
exactly,
it. Sure.
Exactly. And I can't even point to that. I can't be like where was I a big deal? Not, I took classes a lot of places. I performed at some places, but I didn't run. I wasn't like the guy at the place. You were the guy at the place.
You've done some stuff.
I've done some stuff.
I don't know. Being the guy at the place is sort of a double-edged sword, because then that's also the person that everyone complains to, which is fine. I don't mind people complaining. It's when they start blaming me. It's like when you mentioned 30 Rock, it's like that the fake when they have to go to Boston to do the show, and she makes up a name of a fake person that everyone can blame, which is hilarious. Because that's an old. I saw what was the documentary about the producer. I can't remember his name. He did all the. He'd been around forever and ever, and he was John John Denver's like tour manager like early on in his career.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things where he like John Denver called him from Europe. He's like, the tour is terrible, the hotels are terrible, the food is terrible. And then he was like, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. All right, hold on a second. And then calls him back like 5 minutes later. He goes, okay, it's this guy in Scotland who's overseeing the whole European tour. His name is whatever. He goes, I just fired him. So from moving forward, you tell the crew, you tell the band, things are gonna be much better. The hotels are gonna be. He's like, I made him up. Didn't exist. So a lot of times where I felt like there were some times where people would complain about me or say things about me, and I'm just like, that sounds like a guy you made up, because that's not what I'm doing at all.
Well,
Also, like it doesn't fit the narrative either, because it's like I'm working 80 to 100-hour weeks
yeah,
for free.
yeah.
This is my grand Machiavellian plan, and it's a terrible plan. I've done this all wrong.
Obviously, you were more tapped into IO than I was, but I never heard a negative thing about you, so I wouldn't worry too much
That's
about
nice to
that.
hear.
Um,
Okay, good. Knock on wood.
Before the pandemic, I was already kind of like starting to step back a little bit from improv and sketch to focus on screenwriting.
Sure.
And that's kind of
For
where
sure.
this podcast came from, to kind of, because I needed something performative again and social again.
Sure.
I want to ask, this is where I start a lot of these episodes. So the last 3 years, what has your life been, what has it been like? What have you learned about yourself? How did you change? Let's look back on this wonderful time.
Yeah, I got very lucky early on, because I was working on 2 projects. One of which was the Dr. God animated show Held In on Sci-Fi Channel. So we did our second season completely remotely, because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, which was really nice too, because then NBC Universal bought us all professional independent voiceover rigs to just live in our house. And they're like,
that's nice,
add it to the budget, call it a gift to the cast. I'm just like, no, if you brought us into a vocal booth, you would be real huge insurance liability. and you don't want our cooties. You don't want us, because it was so early in the disease, nobody knew anything about it. They're like, you touched it, it's yours. So that's nice. I got that in my closet right now. It makes voiceover auditions very easy. So I was working on that. And so at least I had money and income coming in and something creative to do, and it was with all my best friends and Dr. God. So it made the workflow doable, because it was the second season, we'd already done it, and we had great executives who gave us great notes, and it sort of made it easier for that to keep going until, of course, series of layoffs and another series of layoffs. And it's like, as you know how it goes, like certainly you get to a level of executive where you just run out of angels. You just run out of people that like your show and care about it.
Are you saying that there is turmoil in the TV industry right now? That there's is that possible?
It was even then. Yeah. It was even then. And that's just sort of the nature of our business. The new guys come in and they want their own stuff, which makes sense, because if the stuff from their predecessor is successful, they don't get any credit for it. So why continue to like sort of run on that? I feel like take a W where you can take a W, and our show is so massively cheap. I think looking back on it, if they had realized, oh, we're going to be inside for 3 years, or it's going to be so long for this stuff to come back, and animation being animation and taking off the way it is, they probably should have looked at the ledger and been like, for what we're getting to fill the hours, this costs nothing. Nothing. And then I was also continuing to work, and that's where it got hard, is because I was continuing work. I'm the writer of the official adaptation of the Anarchist Cookbook. I've been working on that since 2019.
Wow.
Yeah, and I beat out like 30 other different guys, because it's a cookbook. There's no story, there's no narrative, there's no characters. It's just four sections, drugs, weapons, that kind of stuff, explosives, and so a good portion of that took me down some really gnarly rabbit holes, the internet and the dark web. And the way I always like to put it is that, like everyone else, I was horrified by the events on January 6th, but I wasn't surprised. It was very weird to sit in there and watch this stuff live, watching like CNN anchors being like, we're not sure who these people are. I'm like, that's a 3%er. Those are Proud Boys. Those are the Oath Keepers. That's Baked Alaska. Baked Alaska, I know for a fact, has COVID right now, and he's in Nancy Pelosi's office. So a lot of that really took a dive on my mental health. So at the grateful urging of my girlfriend, I went into therapy, and that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's a as everybody else is going through the stress and pressure of being quarantined and not knowing what the future's like, I was doing that, as well as filling my brain with the most hateful shit,
Hmm.
the most dangerous shit you probably ever heard. Like, I'm confident that I'm on somebody's watch list somewhere,
I
just from the
feel
internet search.
I feel exactly the same. This
Yeah.
was pre-pandemic, but my first
Mhm.
script that kind of got me some attention was also like it was not quite Anarchist Cookbook level, but it was about these sort of
Mhm.
right-wing uprising in the country. And I
Oh
wrote
yeah.
it like right before Charlottesville happened. But I was doing so much like it turned because I was trying to write it as like this sort of satire of like, man, it'd be crazy if these things happened. And then I was just like, oh well, my satire became ripped from the headlines thriller.
Yeah.
But it
Exactly.
was all the research, all the dark stuff. Like, yeah, I am
Yeah.
positive. I am also positive that they're if they come for you, they're coming for me. It's going to happen to us
Yeah.
both.
And then on top of that too, there was an April. There was the other thing I'm working on that it's my own independent project. There was a quadruple murder in Mandan, North Dakota, which is right next to Bismarck. It's kind of their twin cities, like
Hmm.
St. Paul, Minneapolis is like Mandan, Bismarck. And it was a chiropractor went in to a in like industrial sort of rental business, place of business, family business, and just brutally stabbed and shot 4 people, and absolutely no one has any idea why.
Yeah.
And so I just got that, and sort of the my radar went off, and so I'd been working on that for a good long while on top of it. And the twists and turns of that story are so wild. I went to the trial, like
Oh
thanks
wow.
to the slow moving wheels of justice and a combination. I was going to go teach somewhere and it didn't work out, and then I went to and then I went, I'm going to go up there for 2 days of research, and it just worked out. I was like, well, they're having the trial. I can just stay next. So yeah, Liz came up, met me up there, and then we did like a road trip down south, because now we were finally like able to be outside,
Yeah.
or at least go to places. So we're like, all right, let's take a road trip. So Monday morning we went to the trial. I sat about 20 feet away from him. He absolutely did not think he did it. It was very
Sure.
clear. We got lucky. It was the day that the CBI, which is like the state version of the FBI,
Hmm.
those guys were testifying, and kudos to them, because I knew just about everything there was to know about the case that was publicly available.
Hmm.
And they did a really good job of keeping that stuff sort of in-house. Like when he shot him 9 times, I didn't know it was a revolver, which means he
Hmm.
reloaded, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then August 1st of this past year, he hung himself in jail, so we'll have no idea what's going on. So the stuff about it was, I couldn't write it as a true crime. My original idea was like, I'll do like a Fargo kind of thing, or like The
Yeah. Hmm.
Killing, but it's so unbelievable as truth that I had to make it a horror comedy. I had to make it like
Hmm.
an X-Files meets Psych kind of thing, and I added like a supernatural eldritch horror aspect to it, because if I just tried to write it straight, the executive notes would all be like, but but what's his motive? Why did he did it? We don't know. No one
Right.
knows. And
Right.
now no one will ever know. It's still going, because his lawyers are appealing to the North Dakota State Supreme Court right now, that just because he's dead doesn't mean he doesn't have the right to appeal his case and get it overturned. So I was
Oh,
like, yeah,
jeez.
it's all legal arguments. It's all about setting
Yeah.
precedent. So like that's the stuff I've been working on. There's another thing I'm working on that I can't tell you about, but
Sure.
it's a true crime, serial killers, child sex trafficking. How deep does this conspiracy go? Things. I'm just like, can someone hire me to write like on the Powerpuff Girls?
Yeah.
I will write a My Little Pony today, please. And
How?
so it's funny you said
Yeah.
like not to go crazy during doing this podcast is one of the ways. I wrote a book about being crazy
Yeah.
during the pandemic. Yeah, for a year I wrote a book, pretty much like one line or one paragraph at a time, just when I had a thought. And literally I was like, I'm gonna go crazy. I need to write something. I was like, oh, let's write the book from the perspective of someone who's crazy. So
Yeah.
not, I mean, if you read the whole 100 pages, it makes sense in a way. So I'm doing a different project with it. But yeah, it was just something to be like, yeah, I wrote a book. What's it about? Absolutely nothing. It's about nothing. It's madness. Yeah.
So you brought up something that I do want to dive into, because I think it's very interesting to me. Um, the ability to, and I think need to, find humor in really dark things. Where do you think that comes from for you? And like how, like, I don't know if my first, as much as I'm a comedy person and I do like dark comedy, I don't know if my first thought would have been, I'm going to take this murder trial and turn it into a horror comedy. You know what I mean? So where does that where does that come from for you?
I think I've always sort of been that way. Like I always struggle with ideation and depression for a good long while. I'm much better now. I'm good. Haven't had those thoughts in years. I'm good. Still in therapy.
Same,
I left for a while. Yeah, I left for a while, and then I just recently came back because I was like, oh yeah, this stuff is getting, because all these projects are getting up again, and I'm just like, oh, you just need a release valve. I think for me, I've always sort of like the darker stuff. I've always been, even as a young kid, I was always drawn to like, Robin Williams and Carlin and Pryor and those guys. And I just knew that there was something important about doing that. And I think it's just as I grew up and I was sort of like such an angry young kid and an angry young man, that was sort of like, well, dark comedy is at least something you're allowed to laugh at and still be like edgy and still be like funny or be cool or whatever. Which is ironic because I don't like mean humor. Like I don't like
same.
Yeah, I don't want to mention any names, but there are certain TV shows where all the characters are fucking brutal to each other. People are like, that's just like my friends and me. I'm like, your friends are awful. It's one thing. It's one thing to bust each other's balls or like give each other shit about stuff and all that, but just like the lengths of that stuff. So I think the dark comedy for me, just as it became more and more, I was just like, now even as like a professional comedian, quote unquote, I think it's just for us, like I like the challenge and I like hitting that bullseye at the center of the Venn diagram of like, oh, that's really, really funny. But oh God, it's Jesus Christ, O'Connell. Like that to me is like I change it. And so it's a weird thing, like for like Mandan, the Mandan one, which is called Strange Magic, it is very like rough. It's very like sort of Jesus Christ, what the fuck, this Lovecraftian stuff. But then the comedy is very sweet and it's about being friends. And I think some of that too comes from my love of professional wrestling. And then best friendship-based wrestling is always the best wrestling. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. You said you were an angry young man growing up. You grew up.
Oh, hell yeah.
We're both. Some people would say I'm not from the South. I think it counts. I'm from West Virginia. You're from North Carolina.
Yeah. That's about the same. Yeah.
Yes.
Where in coal country are you from, man?
I'm from a small town called Bluefield, which was like right on the Virginia border. You're from High Point, right?
High Point, North Carolina. I'm born and raised. Yeah.
So I don't think I've ever been to High Point, but I've driven by it 100 times between there and Myrtle Beach.
I mean, my parents retired in North Myrtle Beach. So
my parents are retired in Myrtle Beach.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We should all hang out.
Yeah, my High Point is known for two things. Well, I mean, technically, I'm Piedmont Triad, which is Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem.
Okay.
That's sort of the area. Neither one of them are really big enough to be big on their own. So I was born in Greensboro Hospital, raised in High Point, went to college in Winston-Salem. I'm Piedmont Triad through and through. High Point is known for two things. One is being the furniture capital of the world.
Yep, I was gonna say, I know that.
Yeah. And the other one is our nickname is Little Chicago, which was very eye-opening to my parents who moved from Chicago to North Carolina. High Point is the 259th largest city in America, and we are currently number 34 in murders per capita.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it has been that, I mean, the first guy to tell my mom that, like, oh, Diane, don't you know that this is Little Chicago, was a doctor in 1973. Like, we've had that reputation for a long while. The actual Chicago is currently only 28th in murders per capita. Jeez. And then I just found out, because I'm also writing something about my hometown, looking it up. Yeah, like we're 34. I think Greensboro is like 45 and Winston-Salem was 56. So just all of us are like, pow, 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 pow. So so that's where I'm from. But so it's like the dark joy. You gotta laugh to keep from crying, which is also the Irish Catholic thing. So that's probably where the dark gallows humor comes from.
Yeah, I was raised Roman Catholic, so I think also a similar like a lot of guilt, a lot of trying to find the humor in very dark things. So There's something in your bio that I am a little jealous of, actually.
Please.
You
Okay.
went
Go on.
to North Carolina School of the Arts,
That is correct.
where we're from, there's not a lot of that. There's not a lot of art
No.
schools, not a lot of film
No,
stuff. I looked at
No,
North
sir.
Carolina School of the Arts. I really wanted to go. For one thing, it was just was uncomfortable with the loans. Like I was a little scared of it, and I was a little scared of studying something that can be a very hard business to get into.
Amen.
But let me live vicariously through you a little bit.
Please.
Like how like that's a very prestigious school that a lot of great people have come out of. Danny McBride, Jody Hill, David Gordon Green, Mary Louise Parker, Chris Parnell, Jada Pinkett Smith. Like just and Brian James O'Connell. So there's
Anthony Mackie, Jonathan Majors.
There you go.
People. Yeah.
So when you were there, were you there at the same time as some of those people, and what?
Oh yeah, me and Dave are Gordon Green are the same graduating class, and Dan and all those boys are like years behind me. I went there. I was lucky enough to go from like '98, class of '98. The school is very young. The school has been around for a while, but the school of filmmaking department is very young. I'm part of the second graduating class ever.
Okay,
it's still a fairly young school, and they sort of. Not disrespecting anybody else, because obviously lots of people have, and there's a high school program. Anthony Mackie was in the high school program when I was there. I saw him in a great Irish play. He did a fantastic a cappella version of Take It Down from the Mast, which was lovely. So from like 98 to like 2002 is sort of known as the golden years, where a lot of people came out that Danny and Jody and Dave all have rough house pictures together. So they Eastbound and Down all the way to Halloween Kills. Craig Zobel, obviously. Jeff Nichols was a couple years behind me. He's great. He was up for an Oscar for directing a couple years ago.
Jeff Nichols, yeah.
Yeah, my buddy Zine, my very, very good friend Zine Baker, who was the editor on Thor Ragnarok and WandaVision. God, I mean, Jeff Siebenek is he's editing The Mandalorian. You got Shalene Choksi was the showrunner on Major Crimes. He was on Nip Tuck and whatever Major Crimes was. The Closer before that. So there's just a murderer's row of talent that came out of there that I just kind of got like my best friend Brian Mandel is just like, he did Alaska: The Last Frontier. He's got like a list of Survivor super successful reality shows behind him. He's doing a documentary about Bill Graham right now on his own pocket. So it's just like famous music promoter, because he's a huge Deadhead and Fishhead. So I got very lucky that I was also in state. Like it wasn't an out of state thing.
Right.
It was right down the road. I got in there when we were still working out the abandoned diaper factory. It wasn't until my last 2 years that they built that giant back lot with all the, like every time I go back, it's just like, what is that? And they're like, that's the animation building where we spent $34 million. I'm like, Jesus, okay, I guess. Yeah. It really is sort of a crown jewel in the university system now. Whereas back there, we were literally like, hey, we're having our class in a trailer. So I got a little bit of that, but mostly it's just those friendships, like, and also the drama program too. Like my buddy Brian Abraham is originated the role and is playing Hagrid on Broadway. He's in the Cursed Child. Yeah, that's my boy Ames. We used to live together. John Daly was a year behind me in school of drama. Brett Gelman. A bunch of different people on, like, I just found out Jonathan Majors was.
I didn't know. That's when I didn't know. Yeah.
I just found out a couple of days ago. I was like, oh shit. Yeah, similar to Anthony Mackie. He was there at UNCSA, and then he went on to Juilliard, and then got that. Like, yeah, Anthony Mackie was in the same Juilliard class as like Lee Pace. I'm like, Jesus Christ. That's enough talent alone. Yeah. And then you're saying, yeah. I also found out that Jonathan Majors got hired his first role before he even graduated, which was like, oh, very Tom Hulse. That's the most famous story, is that Tom Hulse. Tom Hulse, when he was at the summer between his junior and his senior year, he booked the lead role in the Broadway premiere of Equus. Oh, and then yeah. So yeah, basically the school just said, you graduated. You don't have to come back. Here's your diploma. You're in a world famous Tony Award winning play. You're gonna be okay.
When you were at North Carolina School of the Arts, did you have that feeling of like, these people are going places, we're going places, or was it just like, we're just a bunch of kids, who knows?
My freshman year, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, because I was like, came to it late. I always thought I was going to be a musician, but my parents are very much about education. My dad didn't go back to school until after his accident. My mom only did 2 years of radiological technology study at St. Joseph. So like going to college was not a question. You are going, but whatever. And so my sister had gone to a private school. So I think once my parents were like, thank God it's something creative. Thank God it's something that he loves. We trust that he's not going to drop out of after 2 years.
Sure.
Because if I was studying finance, forget it. Like that's, or if I went to like a regular state school that was just like, find out what you want to do for the first 2 years, I'd probably been angling to like get my band on the road and then get like successful enough that I'd be like, hey, I can't go back for my junior year. So they were that, and then my dad saw the the tuition. They were like, oh, thank God it's not a private school. and then being slowly like, close enough that I could come back, be independent, but like it's only a 20-30 minute drive from Winston-Salem to High Point. So I think that all sort of came together. And then having all those guys around who were like, I was just constantly surrounded with super talented, really creative people that knew that they wanted to be filmmakers since they were 4. Like they like had cameras when they were kids and had been making movies and stuff. And I've been doing a little bit of that, but like only as like side project of like in high school, they're like, oh, you can do a book report, you can do a written report, or you can make a video. I'm like, oh, let's make a video. Like that sounds way better.
Sure.
And so I think eventually once it got to the point where I was starting to, I think around my sophomore year where people were like doing fun things like naming characters after me in a movie, like just like a rib, but also asking me to act in their things. And then once people start to see that like what you're capable of, because you're not just doing exercises of like learning how to light, you're learning stuff of like this is the type of movies they want to make. And I think there was enough of it where people were like, oh, that's funny. Oh, that's cool, O'Connell. I'm like, oh, whew, I'm good. All right. And just I had a lot of really good people that around me that they were able to see the kindness buried deep inside of me, so that they would ignore all the annoying angry white man shit that I was doing.
Let's talk about the interesting choice of phrase, angry white man, because that was one of the first movies that you directed, and
second movie
you directed, and it was was it a lot of North Carolina School of the Arts people? Is that how you found?
It was my best friends. Brian Mandel produced it. It was the DP. My friend Bob Harrison wrote it, produced it with Mandel, and starred in it along with this guy named Tim Tracy, who was our producer. Love Tim Tracy. And Mandel had shot my first one. And so when they were putting together Angry White Man, Bob is very close with Dave Green still. Bob and Dave still talk pretty regularly. And Bob lives in Wilmington, as does Mandel. So when those guys are in town shooting, like, hey, come on down to the set. We're doing gemstones today. Richard Wright will pick you up at the front, right? Whatever. So Dave Green read the script and was like, Bob, this is awesome. This is great. You have to play the lead role. You will go crazy trying to direct an actor to just do a version of you that you do better. And they were like, okay, well, that makes sense. We're going to trust him. That's true. And at that point, they're like, well, I don't want to write it, direct it, and star in it, and produce it. That's too many hats. That's always usually the sign of a bad movie if you see the same name over and over and over again, right? Scored by, right? You're like, oh no. And so they're like, well, I worked on, and Mandel was like, not only is O'Connell one of our best friends, and he has the same sense of humor we do. He goes, I worked on his first movie. I was the DP, which was a really brutal serial killer horror movie. If he can do that and not lose the entire set, then he could probably do our, silly little redneck comedy. And so, they called me up. Mandel called me up and said, hey, do you want to? I was like, absolutely, I do. But I guess I should do the thing where I should read the script, and just be a professional. So he called me on Friday. I read the script on Saturday, and then Sunday was the Super Bowl. I remember that because we were at the house that Conowall and Cowick and Tommy were all living at. We're watching the Super Bowl, and he called me and said, hey, what do you think? I said, I think it's fantastic. Let's go, man. What's happening? He goes, yeah, we're thinking about shooting in April. I was like, oh, this year? It's February 2nd. Right. So it all came together really, really quickly. And that was, I should take it back a step, because then when Mandel called me on Friday, it was like, hey, you want to do it? We're going to do this. He was like, yeah, read the script, man. Do you know who the comedian Matt Berry is? I was like, Dr. Lucien Sanchez? I absolutely do. Because I I was a huge Garth Marenghi nerd. And so he was like, yeah, we're getting him to play Bulldog Hayes. And that was like, because not a lot of people know this. So like Matt sort of considers himself a musician first.
Oh wow, no, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, that's why Toast of London always has an original song by him. That's why he's always working music into stuff. My favorite, yeah. So the idea of him being able to come to America, play a cowboy kind of character, because all those guys grew up watching old cowboy movies on the BBC, because that's how the BBC did it to fill daytimes. That's why so many English and Australian actors do such great cowboy accents, is because they grew up doing it as kids.
Okay.
Yeah, and we got very lucky that he sent it to the agent in the UK, and then when Mandel called it up, the agent was like, well, you're in luck. Matt's in my office right now reading the script. And in the background, he's like, tell them I'm 30 pages in, it's hilarious. I'll do it. Right. And that was it. That's how we got it. So the idea that he could play songs and then and do a cowboy sort of thing and come to America. It's his first American film.
Yeah.
And his agents helped us because they were really, really high on him and trying to push him to become sort of like the next Ricky Gervais. Like, he has the office here, now he's gonna have the office in America, kind of thing. So
makes sense.
The office, the show, not the location.
You worked with that cast was fantastic. In addition to Matt Berry, you had Steve Agee and
Steve Agee and Scoot McNairy,
Mary Birdsong, and then I want us to talk more about it, but we already are down to 8 minutes left, so I want to move.
Sure.
So you also did Bloodsucking Bastards a couple years,
that is correct.
Like 4 years later, and the cast of that one again is insane.
Pretty lucky.
Fran Kranz, and a guy named Pedro Pascal, who
it's funny because I have a Google alert for all my stuff, for all my projects, for Dr. God, for my name, for Bloodsucking Bastards, all that, and I can always tell when Pedro's doing well. Which, I mean, he's doing what he's been on. He's doing
all right. Yeah,
he's been on a tear.
Yeah.
And we got perfectly lucky because we got him right after he got cast, but before he had left and shot it. So I was like, perfect timing for Game of Thrones. Pedro.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So and then like without Fran signing on is what made the green light happen. If we don't have Fran, so I'll forever be grateful for Fran going like, this is cool, this is good, and we're shooting this during pilot season, so I don't have to do pilot season, and I can do your movie in January and February, and then I'm going to go do a play in New York in March, right? Yeah. So he's like, hated pilot season. So Pedro, I can always tell him Pedro's doing well because my name keeps coming up. There's 2 TikToks like going around right now, which is really nice. One is like a role, like a clip from a role that Pedro did for like every year of his career, like starting in like 99 with like Buffy and going all the way. So I'm just watching it. I'm like, give it to me. 2015 Bloodsucking Bastards. I was like, yeah.
And for people who haven't, go ahead.
Yeah. And then there's one where there's a clip from the movie where he turns to Beth, our friend Beth Russell, who's this lovely, funny, bubbly energy girl. She's like, I'm a virgin. You all are. And he's like, she's like, ah! And there's just the girl watching it going. And then like the comments underneath that are some of the filthiest stuff I've ever read that wasn't explicit pornography. Like one woman was like, I have to find out how to rent this movie and then reach into my bedside drawer. And you're like, Jesus.
Well, just so she knows, it's on Tubi.
Yeah.
It's
Amazon Prime. Yeah.
Amazon Prime, Tubi. It's available. It's a very funny movie. People haven't seen it. It's sort of an Office Space meets Shaun of the Dead kind of thing. A company
with vampires,
with vampires instead of zombies. Very funny movie. You wrote it with your comedy team, with Dr. God, and you all were in it.
Dr. God, yeah.
What was it like writing a movie with that many other co-writers? Was that like,
well, it wasn't our first time. Dr. God is very good. We had written like Grease Truckers together and a couple others. We are very good about dividing and conquering. So basically kind of whoever comes up with the idea or pitches the idea to the group, that person is sort of like in charge. The same way in sketch, of like, you wrote the sketch, you're kind of producing it now. If it gets into the show, you're responsible for getting the props and all that. But when we write stuff, we'll always bring it back to the group. We'll always have a polish. And the very last thing we do is before we let anyone outside of the 5 of us read it, we do a brutal, like anything that's not a B+ or above joke, gone, right? Just gone. So nothing ever leaves our circle without having all 5 of our hands stamped on it. And so it came together very quickly. We wrote that first draft because Ryan had already written the script, and so we were adapting something, so we had something to work off on in the first place. We only did like 1 or 2 small tweaks that sort of like fix the problem that they were kind of like too close to see anymore, because they had gone through so many drafts and so many directors at that point. And then from there, it came very quickly. Justin gets up early in the morning. He would write like 6 a.m. He would write till like noon or one. Sean would come over to my house. We would write until 5 or 6, or if we had to go bartend that night at IO, or
Mhm.
to 7 or 8, and then be like, all right, dinner, and send it back. And then Justin in the morning would come and see what we'd written. And then like there was only like, so that first draft came together very, very quickly. I want to say like less than 15 days,
Mhm.
maybe not that. And then since we know each other so well and we get along so well, we're the brothers that we never had, and we had already done so much writing and working together that we had such similar tastes in comedy. There was only like 3 or 4 times where like we would go, like Justin would change a joke and we would change it and he would change it back again, and we'd be like, all right, what's your deal with this joke? What
Sure.
pitch it to me? What's the problem? And so that came together very quickly. And then everybody, Justin was also a producer on it. He did a lot of like a lot of writing on set. All of us were pitching things,
Mhm.
and we just got lucky very, very quickly that we had the right people and the right crew and that cast, which is being able to bring in also some of our friends, and then also add these great names to the Dr. God family, like Pedro and Fran and Joey and Joel
Mhm.
Murray. We had known for a while, but like Emma,
Mhm.
Emma and I are writing something together right now.
Oh,
And
cool.
so yeah, so
She's great in
she's
that.
actually she is fantastic. She's texting me right now, so so I'm like, I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
I got
tell her we said
five. I got
hey.
5 minutes. Yeah,
um, you guys are all improvisers, the writers of this
that's
movie,
true.
and you as well. I know I don't want to. Everybody always asks like, "What was improv? What was written?" I don't really care. It's all how it comes together. But
Well,
as a
yeah.
director, how does improv maybe help you on set in terms of what you're getting and what to, being more
Oh, for
open
sure.
maybe?
Yeah, the movie itself is probably about 85 to 90% scripted,
Sure.
and maybe even a little bit higher. Like we really, as a director, what I always do is say, give me 2 or 3 takes. I don't do a lot of takes. It is rare for me to do like a fourth or fifth take of something.
Hmm.
I usually just say like, hey, here's the professional agreement. Let's take what we have on paper and make sure we get it, and then I'll give you 1 or 2 to play with. And we'll just use the best versions and in the editing room. I'm not going to be precious about the words, but let's get it first. And I'm an actor, so I'm an
Hmm.
actor's director. So actors know that they can trust me, that I'm going to make them look good, and that I know I have a good taste. So I'm not going to pick I'm not going to fall in love with the visuals and then put a performance that isn't good into the cut. And so at that point, I knew we were in good shape when Joel Murray came up to me and said, where Joey Kern came up to me and said, hey, Joel's got a pitch for a line I should say when I stab Dave with a pencil. And then Joel comes over and goes, what if Joey were to say, yippee-ki-yay, Ticonderoga? And I was like, that's hilarious. That's awesome. We're definitely going to use that. And Joe's like, yeah. And then like he and Joel are like shaking hands. And I was like,
Yeah.
we have longtime professional comedian actors who are pitching lines of dialogue for other characters in scenes that they're not even in. I was like, we've got a good one here. I knew
Yeah.
we were in good shape when the actors were like, liked it so much that they were like, hey, what if you said this? Oh, that's great. Let's go ask Brian together. Right. And then they're like, yeah.
That sounds like a
It
really
was,
fun shoot, man.
oh,
We,
it was. It
we've
was
only
very
got
early on.
we've
Yeah.
only got a minute and a half left, so I do want to
Great.
give
Do it.
you this time right here
Speedway.
to
Yes.
where can people still like see Dr. God shows? Where can people follow you? Anything else you want to pitch?
Yeah, we're working on it. We're getting here and there. We're slowly but surely getting live stuff back. We've got a bunch of irons in the fire for Dr. God and Dr. God affiliated shows, like television shows and movie projects. You can find me at B3OC on Twitter and Instagram and all that. I got a couple things coming up. I'm teaching a class in April on the deconstruction of the Pack Theater, completely online, all Zoom.
Mhm.
We added a second class because we just sold the first one out, which I was
Nice.
very proud of. And I'm traveling to Sacramento this weekend. I'm traveling to Baltimore in March to teach. I'm traveling to Salt Lake City the first weekend of April to teach. I booked a couple of movies. I'm trying to like slowly but surely feel like it's good. And I have the Anarchist Cookbook, this other television project. And then I wrote an animated stop motion feature that it's looking for directors right now. So my hope is that water all those go so I can get money, because right now all this shit is for free.
I hear that. Okay, so with our last little bit of time, I want to get to know you on an even
Yeah,
deeper level. What is the
sure.
meaning of life?
Oh, I can tell you, but you won't like it. It's 42.
If you could know your future but couldn't change it, would you want to, or would you rather not know?
Yes, I'd like to know, just for no
Your meeting has ended. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to 39-Minute Conversations, hosted and produced by Brian T. Arnold. Music by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and tune in for new episodes, and don't forget to rate and review. If you didn't like what you heard, please don't do any of that. That's okay too. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe and be well.